I'd like to first thank our sponsors this morning, the Port of New Orleans. Anna Menendez is here representing the Port of New Orleans. The Port of South Louisiana and Joel Chasson. All right, great. And the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana with Darlene Catan. Darlene, thank you so much. Well, thank you all sponsors. We couldn't do it without you, I can tell you. And our special guest this morning, Ambassador Luis Gallegos, the ambassador to Ecuador. It's wonderful to have you here, and certainly wonderful to have such a great conversation with you this morning earlier. Mrs. Sylvia Espindola, Embassy of Ecuador. Mr. Jonathan Barada is here, right. Commercial Officer of Ecuador in New York. Mr. Luis Alberto Quinones. Alberto, it's great for you to be here. And Mr. Dominic Knoll, our Chief Executive Officer of the World Trade Center. Dominic? And I would like to introduce our special guest speaker, Ambassador Benignio Gallegos. Ambassador Luis Benignio Gallegos assumed the post of Ambassador to the United States in October of 2006. He served in Washington on a previous occasion as consular in the Ecuadorian Embassy from 1979 to 1980. Most recently, Ambassador Gallegos, who joined the Foreign Service in 1966, served as permanent representative to the United Nations and ambassador to Australia. Prior to that, he was Ecuador's permanent representative to the European Office of the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva from 1997 to 2000. Ambassador to El Salvador in 1994 to 97, Minister and Charge d'Affaires of the Ecuadorian Embassy in Bulgaria from 1985 through 89, Counselor to the Organization of American States from 1978 to 79, and Consul General in Chicago from 1975 to 1978. Let's welcome our Ambassador Luis Gallegos.
Thank you very much. First of all, for those very kind words, Bobby. Bobby and I were talking about our mutual identity and age, because he said you have a long CV, and most of us in our ages have long CVs. It's been quite a pleasure to be a career member of the Ecuadorian Foreign Service. Let me say that I'm very honored to be a member of the Foreign Service of Ecuador, and I've had the distinguished pleasure of being the ambassador to the United States. It's quite a challenge to be an ambassador to the United States because of the intensity of our mutual relations. Undoubtedly, the United States is our first trade partner, both for our exports and for our imports. We export to the United States around $8 billion a year, fundamentally in our major product of exportation to the American market is petroleum. As you know, Ecuador is an oil-producing country, and it has been selling oil to the United States from a secure point. And let me make an emphasis on that, because as we look into the Middle East, we are becoming rapidly a very secure point of provision of petroleum to the American market. Of course, we're a member of OPEC, as most of the oil-producing countries, and we have an ongoing relationship of how we deal with the issue of hydrocarbons in Ecuador. hydrocarbons have been for Ecuador a very substantial and important way of doing business and getting resources, but we look at it also as a very carefully in our environmental field. We are a country, and after the last constitution, more so than today, very much concerned about the environment and the depletion of the environment. So we're very careful, and this is oil that comes from jungle ambience, and it's very difficult to explore and exploit petroleum in jungle areas. Let me say that we introduce most of our products to the American market by a mechanism that's called NMF, Most Favored Nation. That accompanies us for 77% of our non-petroleum exports. That's fundamentally tropical fruits, bananas, coffee, shrimp, and a huge range of that. We can't say we can compete with Louisiana in shrimp, but we're good at it. We grow most of our shrimp in farms. It's farm-bred shrimp. We're the largest operation of shrimp farming in Latin America at present. And we also sell a great number of tilapia into the American market. The other two parts of our scheme of introduction into the American market are called the preference systems. One is GSP. It encompasses a system of 131 countries. It's the generalized system of preferences. And ATPDA, which is a system in which Colombia and Ecuador access the American market. Unfortunately, these are detained in Congress as we speak. They were not extended by Congress since December, and since December GSP and ATPDA since February. Therefore, the debate in Congress has been not in relation to Ecuador or Colombia or anyone in this phase of preference systems, although Colombia's free trade agreement is very much discussed. But we do not see an easy way out of Congress because of the contentiousness of the political situation in Congress. We don't expect that renewal to happen in the next few months, so we are concerned of some of our products, especially in those that cater to our anti-drug efforts. Let me say that as we normally would talk to a business community, we have vital interests with the United States that go way beyond the ambience of trade and investment. We have a national security problem jointly with the United States because of the cocaine industry that comes out of Colombia and Peru. We are the only country in the Andes that does not produce coca leaves and does not process them. We are a country that has been very efficient, let me say, in not letting this scourge come into Ecuador. That is a very big effort for us as a country because we spend not only money, which is around $250 million a year on detaining this in the northern border, but we also sweat and bleed in that border in order to contain this issue. And we are jointly with the United States, we have this problem because you're the principal market in the Western Hemisphere. 400 tons of cocaine come out of that area, both from Colombia and Peru to the American market, and that is $70 billion in cash. We are very efficient in this, as I say, but the last trophy we got is a submarine. And let me just spend a couple of minutes on that. The submarine is, normally the drug traffickers have evolved from boats into submersibles, which are plastic tubes that squirt over the sea and with a couple of motors and a heat blanket are non-detectable by satellite or plane. And these things look like whales. We have a couple of them. I think you have one in Southern Command and the Mexicans have another. They're very difficult to get to. And they're very easy to sink once you get to the place where you're at, so very easy. But this one, the one we got in early September is a submarine with technology, with everything that you need to go in and come back. So with the United States, we're evolving into a strategy of major effort in this thing. We have with the United States a bilateral dialogue that is the basis of our relationship. This is a mechanism of dialogue between two nations. I think that as a professional diplomat, I can say that we have with the United States the same relationship we have with many other countries. We agree on many things. We might agree to not agree on others. And on the 5 pillars of our dialogue One is trade and investment. The other is migratory issues. As you know, we have a very large Ecuadorian community in the United States. We're a 12 million country with 1.5 million Ecuadorians to 2 million Ecuadorians in the United States. We have 15 consulates in the United States, plus honorary consulates in various cities. Those are official. The first 15 are manned consulates, which we have, and we also have cooperation. We have a very good program of cooperation, and I'll talk to you some about that. We have a couple of projects which I am very interested in your academic and business community get involved with in these programs. And we have a pillar on issues that have to deal with environment. We would, and security. The other pillar is, of course, the one I was referring to on security issues. Ecuador is a dollarized economy, as it uses the dollar as the currency. We do not have a national currency since the year 2000. So profits of any size are very easy to ship back and forth. You don't have a currency disbalance. But that also is a challenge for us in the area because our neighbors devalue their currency in order to compensate this and sometimes make us more uncompetitive with the others. And so we have to be very good in technology, science and technology, marketing strategies, capabilities of entrepreneurship in order to compensate that type of competition. We also would like very much to go into the academic field with you. We have very good universities in Ecuador, but we have just launched 2 major initiatives. We'd like professors or students who are in PhD ranks to go to Ecuador. We're willing to finance them for 6 months or more for investigations in Ecuador. We're inviting professors from all over the world. It's been a success story. I really didn't imagine that we would have so many people interested in going to Ecuador. Ecuador is a relatively secure country in this thing. It's a mega diverse country. You will find in Ecuador, in a given part of the jungles of Ecuador, more species than you would have in all the North American continent. So it is a hub of investigators from all over the world. And we have launched an initiative called ITT, which is the maintaining in our soil petroleum in one of the major parks of Ecuador. It's a national reserve, and we are moving toward that. What we're trying to do is not exploit that petroleum, and in order to get half of the compensation that we would have exported it, the money we would have gotten it from exporting petroleum, we are trying to get from international donors not to exploit it. It's a new task. I think it's a post-petroleum era idea, very much advanced in that sense, and we're sort of trying to put it on the framework of what we're doing in Ecuador. Ecuador is a very strong democracy. We're going into a referendum on the 7th of May. But getting down to business, I was looking over the numbers of Louisiana, and Louisiana is the 3rd largest source of exports to Ecuador after Texas and Florida. In the year 2010, we have 433 million. We'd like that to go up substantially because the other ports or entry points that we have are various in the United States. It depends on carriers, it depends on port facilities. We understand that very well. Texas is 2.2 billion and Florida is 1.2 billion. And Texas is right next to you. So we'd like to multiply the diversity of this. We have joint interests in importing and export. We would like to see a trade mission go down to Ecuador to talk to our people. And fundamentally, we're interested, as all countries are, in investment, productive investment and employment, as all of us are. But we have certain niches which I think we can adequately use with New Orleans and Louisiana in general, being that all the sponsors of this are all ports. So I'm very happy that you're here. I think we're in a very interesting phase of the Ecuadorian economy, which is expanding. But I also think that the changes in the world with competitiveness from other parts are also something we look at very, very closely. As you understand, my foreign minister just came back from the Middle East last week. We have joint ventures with Europe and with a whole range of countries which we do business with, and we have very good relations. But of course, China is a very important player in Ecuador. China, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if I thought China was going to invest in oil in Ecuador, I would have probably said no. And I travel to China once every year, so I'm rather familiar with it. But 10 years ago, it bought a Canadian concern called Encana, and then it came into the mining sector, and now it's in the investment in generating electricity in hydroelectric plants. It's been very active in Latin America. In Ecuador, it's one of the major investors, and it continues to be one of the major players and will be for the foreseeable future a very important player. That says a lot in how we can strengthen our relationship with the United States, which is my personal objective. The consulate in New Orleans, and I have to refer to Luis Quiñones. Luis is our new consul general here. He is a very efficient consul. I just visited the offices yesterday. I'm coming to New Orleans. You have beautiful installations of a consulate here in One Canal Street. We hope you can visit them. We are open for business in New Orleans, and I'd like to say that very forcefully. We are here to stay and do a mutual beneficial relationship with not only the business community, but also with the academic community and for the people of the Ecuadorians who live here. Let me also refer to tourism, because we may find a very important niche there. I went, me and my wife had to go to Bourbon Street yesterday. So we walked around and saw your very interesting quarter there. My impression is that we have tourism from the United States, which is the major provider of tourists to Ecuador, in the range of 1.2 million persons a year. We're increasing that constantly. Of course, Ecuador is a very unique place. It has the Galapagos Islands, it has major treasures of the world, it has different ambiances, and we could probably do this jointly. I have, of course, a port facility in New Orleans that is very important to us, but also air transport is extremely important for us. Let me say that with an emphasis, because we get supplies and spare parts in our industrial sectors. You call the United States, and if you want a spare part by tomorrow, you have it in DHL, provided from wherever. Most of them, if you use UPS, they're out of Atlanta. They're out of Miami, out of Houston. We have direct flights from New York, from Miami, from Atlanta, from Houston on a daily basis. We're going to, and Ms. Spindola here, who is my company from my embassy, just finished the negotiations with the United States and Civil Avionics to increase to 12 frequencies added to the ones we have. We have 10 to 12 frequencies a day to Ecuador from the United States. So shipping is very important, both to Ecuador and from Ecuador, because flowers, fresh cut flowers that are cut at 4 in the morning are brought to the United States by plane, and they hit the American market in 4 to 5 hours. But they also are transported to other hubs through the American airline facilities. We export to Russia via Atlanta, and this is a major competitive issue of how we can become more efficient, cut costs in transportation, cut costs in how we do business. And of course, the streamlining of this is what can we do jointly that will be a mutual benefit. I'm going to just say that we believe that our relationship with the United States is a very strong one. We had Mrs. Clinton's visit to Ecuador last year. We hope to have the mechanism of dialogue meeting in June. We have an ongoing relationship. Next week we have the visit of the Undersecretary of Defense. Last week we had the Refugee Undersecretary. We have constant visits going and coming from Ecuador, and a very, very strong and mutual relationship. Now, we hope to increase that relationship And this is where you also will have to see the possibilities of our relationship with your state and the area of influence of your state. We would like to sit down with you and bring our businessmen up to New Orleans. I think that's a good step forward. Having your people go down there, visit us, create an ambience where we can talk about these things is always a very positive step forward. My last reflection is the following. We are bound by a geographical certainty with the United States, which is that they are our major market, but there is a reason for that, really. We've been traditionally buying from the United States, and we buy 95% of our wheat from the United States. We sometimes diversify markets of production of wheat because of the pricing. We're going to meet a very complicated situation in food pricing in the world in general, as this thing spirals up. Most of those revolts in the countries of Africa are due to prices in food, really. As this goes up, we were going to need more production at a lower cost, and that's something we're always interested in. I believe that when I say 95% of our wheat comes from the United States, so does a good section of our soy and corn, which probably comes out of the port of New Orleans. My interest, of course, is to see how we can compensate that 1.5 billion deficit we have with the United States in exports to Ecuador. If we put in the non-oil balance, we export more. We have a surplus of $1 billion, but that's because of the oil pricing. We need to compensate part of that with a more effective, more dynamic export sector to the American market that can equilibrate that importation. That's what we're here for. We're very happy to come back to New Orleans. I would invite you to visit our consulate, talk to our people, be intertwined with us. Yesterday we sat down with Luis, and one of the things we talked about before we sat down with you and not knowing exactly who was going to be here, we talked about his visiting the ports, seeing the possibilities of having a sistership with one of the Ecuadorian cities and ports. That would be a very interesting situation. We do have them with others. Houston is a sister port of Guayaquil. They have the same drenaje, ¿cómo se dice drenaje? When you get the sand out of the river, dredge. They have the same dredging problem. They have the same dredging problem. So in that we can talk about. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much for your kind words, and I'll give it to my colleague and friend Jonathan Vieira, who is from our trade office in New York. We have 2 trade offices in the United States, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, and Jonathan is accompanying us to give you a presentation on more detailed basis on the economy. So I'll let it up to him, and then we'll sit down and answer any questions you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Ladies and gentlemen, first and foremost, I would like to give the Trade Commissioner of Ecuador, Karina Maluisa, best regards. Unfortunately, she was not able to join us do some work engagements planned months in advance. It's an honor for me to have been delegated by the Trade Office of Ecuador and have the opportunity to tell you more about the Ecuadorian exportable offer. First, I would like to give you all a little background about what we do in the Trade Office of Ecuador in New York, which was inaugurated 2 years ago as part of a commercial action of the government of President Rafael Correa. Our main goal is to promote exports from Ecuador and facilitate Ecuadorian companies' entrance to American market as well. For example, last year, we participated in the most important trade shows in New York, like the Fancy Food Show and the New York Chocolate Show, with national pavilions in which Ecuadorian companies were able to participate with their high-quality products. We have focused on identifying commercial and investment opportunities on the East Coast, for which we have organized trade missions with Ecuadorian businessmen who want to introduce their products into the U.S. market, and we have also arranged trade missions investors who want to go to Ecuador and invest. We accomplish our goals by studying the market, investing in promotional events for the company, and promoting the foreign image of Ecuador. This year, we are making an Ecuadorian Trade Week in New York and Washington, with the primary goal of promoting Ecuador as a tourist destination. Without doubt, with the new coordination of the New Orleans, with the new consulate in New Orleans, we are going to be able to create commercial ties and business between New Orleans and Ecuador. After this first encounter, we will analyze the sectors with more potential for business so that we can arrange the transmissions to New Orleans. For example, I have a statistic. Imports from Ecuador to U.S. by the New Orleans port have increased more than 1,000% in the last year. So it's an important date. But what does Ecuador do to have to offer? Ecuador is the world's leading banana exporter. 3 out of every 10 bananas eaten worldwide come from Ecuador. Their high quality is unique and the flavor is exquisite. And the bananas production process meets the requirements of international agreements and social and environmental regulations. Ecuador is the world's 5th largest exporter of shrimp and the 3rd largest exporter of flowers, almost the 7% of the world exports. Ecuador is also the 3rd largest exporter of canned tuna and the first fresh tilapia fillet supplier to the United States. Ecuador is the world's largest producer of fine cocoa and cocoa bean and exporter of 90% of passion fruit concentrate worldwide. Ecuador is one of the few countries in the world that grows almost all varieties of green coffee, washed Arabica, natural Arabica, and Robusta. And Ecuadorian bamboo is known as the world's best bamboo, better known in Ecuador as caña guadua. Ecuador has 125 exportable species of medicinal plants and aromatic herbs, and 69 different exportable fruits categorized in 40 different HS codes. Finally, in terms of service sector, the Trade Office of Ecuador in New York has focused on the promotion of software and touristic services that Ecuador can offer. Ecuador is a small country full of diversity in which a tourist can travel from the Amazonian jungle to the beautiful beaches to the majestic mountains and volcanoes in a matter of days. Ecuador is a country that loves life and where you love life. Thank you.
Do we have any questions from any of you to either the ambassador or from Jonathan? Yes. Yes.
A couple of questions.
Yes.
First, I want to clarify one thing you said earlier. You said Texas and Louisiana have a lot of exports going to Ecuador. In the petroleum industry, a lot of the exports Texas has to Ecuador come from manufacturers in Louisiana.
Okay. that's a good point.
Stealing our numbers.
Okay, that's a very good point.
There was talk about China building a refinery in Esmeraldas last year. Where is that? Is that going to happen? Not going to happen?
Let me give you the exact situation of that. Ecuador sells crude and imports derivatives, which is a very bad business. We have joint agreements with some countries in importing derivatives, derivados, which are, gasoline or diesel or oil fuel, which we have 2 very small refineries in the coast, and one of the projects the government has embarked on is a refinery in Manabí, which is south of Esmeraldas. The refinery in Esmeraldas is an old generation refinery which is being constantly repaired, and it's not good enough to service at the point. We need new technologies in that. The Koreans are embarked with us on the development of a major refinery in the coast. of Ecuador, not only for our internal consumption, for our exportation of oil, of gasoline and others. We've just spent something like $300 million in the factability studies, and I know for a fact that a number of American consulting firms are working on that also. We use American consulting firms a lot. As you know, we have a number of interests with the United States, and we use a number of a very important mechanism of consultative capabilities and services. But we hope that after we have the definitive studies of the Manabí refinery, we can move on to the construction of the refinery.
Well, the second question on that is, the rumors were that the Chinese or the Koreans, I forgot about the Koreans, were going to give the refinery for free to Ecuador if Ecuador sent all their oil over there. Is that,
No, well,
is that just,
No, I think it's more sophisticated than that, really. Yeah, you know, so it's a little more sophisticated than that. First of all, there is a government, there's a government quota of how much petroleum we have under government companies, under the state company, but there are other private sellers of oil. Now, I do think I have to remark here a difference that we observe in the Chinese and the American or the European or the traditional way oil companies or traders view oil. Normally, when you view an oil market from the traditional senses, you see what the split was for the investment. If you have a foreign oil company in a country, we used to have 80% for the company, 20% for Ecuador, under $15 a barrel. You set a price, say $15, and you say anything that goes under 15, the government of Ecuador would pay the company because it would not get its profit basis and so on. But unfortunately, in those cases, nobody said what happens if the barrel of oil went up, and when it hit 80 or 100, then you have a problem of the split. The Chinese are not necessarily interested in the split, but in the resource. And that creates a different dynamic of the market. And I think that you will find it all over the world. They are looking for a security of access to market and production, which gives countries like mine a better profit margin on what they get. Now, as we go into the new phases of the demand of the Chinese economy or the Indian economy, because we have investors from India and investors from Indonesia now, and it's a different market, it's a different petroleum market. And if you put geopolitics on top of that, it will be a very, very interesting market to see in the next few years. Third question?
What is the electricity demand in Ecuador? And is there a shortage of electricity in Ecuador? And are there plans to increase via geothermal? What happened with that?
Well, let me say that the grid in Ecuador was created in the 70s, and most of the hydroelectric projects were done on the eastern highlands. Climate has changed, and unfortunately we ran into a series of problems of rain flow from the Amazon down. As you know, there are certain areas where even the Amazon doesn't have water at the present in certain circumstances. We're building 5 big hydroelectric plants, and one of them is being financed by the Chinese. It's the major hydroelectric plant in Ecuador, and the Chinese are going to finance it completely and build it with us for $2.5 billion. It's the Coca Sinclair, and that will integrate 5 others, which are being built, one by the Russians, which is Toachi Pilatón, and 4 others. We have also bought thermal electric, because since we have petroleum, we have gas, we just bought seven generators from General Electric. So it's a demand market, but we plan to have no necessities of electricity in Ecuador from 2014 on. We have a mutual agreement with the Colombians and Peruvians in which we share a transmission issue, but there are interests. We are interested in that. We have a team of American companies going down there. General Electric and others, we just participated in a bid, and that's a $300 million bid that came out the other day in Ecuador, and they participated in that bid. I think they got part of it. I'm not, I don't know the last date.
But on the geothermal project, that seemed to have been put on hold earlier this year.
Well, it depends on no, some of them, because you need repair of the thermal electric park anyway. So every time you upgrade it.
Not thermoelectric, geothermal.
Well, the geothermal electric is something that we have because we are a volcanic country also. Unfortunately, I have to say volcanic country in the sense that we have 5 active volcanoes in the highlands, and we can't do that. We would be very interested in looking into that. Geothermal and wind is something that we have to go in because Ecuadorian petroleum resources in the end will probably end sometime in the next century, and we need to go into which is fundamentally what we want. We want to upgrade our capacity of producing oil, not only selling crude. We want to upgrade our industries, not only to sell bananas, but to sell service economy. We're very good at selling computer programming and this, and we just sold, one of my companies just sold to the financial system of the United States a major package of software developed by Ecuador and it's sold in Central America and others. As you said, I was ambassador to El Salvador. In El Salvador, what we sell is services. We generally sell computer services, banking system services, and even furniture for banks. We're very good at that. Our systems are recognized. They've won prizes by Microsoft and the rest. So it's an interesting segment of the market.
Thank you. Just an observation and a question. I took note of the sensitivity between oil and other services and commodities and so forth, and or goods. And I gather that sensitivity is born out of some differences in the jobs creation and so forth within your country. And could you tell us a little more about that difference? Because obviously that's something that you're interested in and developing more, and I'm sure there's good rationale behind it. What is the difference between job creation, small businesses, things like that, with the goods and services part of it versus the oil part of it in export?
Well, there's a famous saying that oil can be a curse. And it is a very strategic and high-level product that sells very well, but doesn't create employment. What we need, and I think any ambassador who would come to you would tell you, we need jobs. We need quality jobs. We need high-tech jobs. We need excellent education. This is why we're going into PhDs. We're funding $200 million this year in a $600 million project for PhDs in Ecuadorian PhDs outside, fundamentally to the United States. We are upgrading our capabilities in that. We have to have products that give additional income to Ecuador. Now, and that requires education, it requires technology, it requires a huge range, it requires electricity, an infrastructure. We just built a major infrastructure in Ecuador in the last century. You will find, and we're going into the superhighways now. Just one of your major companies is going into Ecuador in the next few months to exactly contribute to that effort. We acknowledge we need an infrastructure that can cater to the new generation of high technology and value-added products. We're a small country and a developing country, so when you talk about statistics, I have to point out that we're 12 million Ecuadorians, and 50% of those Ecuadorians are under the age of 21, and they will need jobs. At the same time that I'm saying this, I used to measure poverty or access by cell phones. I'm a technical person in that sense. Ecuador has more phones than population. So I still am asking these people how that came about. But if you have 14 million cell phones in a 12 million country, people are talking on 2 phones at a time. That stands to reason. I can understand that. In some parts of the world, you need 2 phones. I sometimes have 2 phones because of the networks, but even in the United States. But the issue is that as youth becomes familiar with all these things, we have one of the most engaging internet populations because we have a huge migratory population outside. We were talking with Bob what produced that. In 1998, our banking system failed because of a liberalization and deregulation of the banking system, according to the Washington Consensus. And 75% of our banks failed. So all the middle class lost its savings. But that meant we dollarized the economy, and that also meant that 1 million Ecuadorians left Ecuador. And that has created a very, very big challenge for our society because that's disintegrated families. Their mothers left, their fathers left, children stayed, and most of that did not come to the United States but went to Europe. So as we talk, internet, Skype, and these types of things, and Facebook are in every village in Ecuador. If you go to any village, the most remote village in Ecuador, you will find 3 signs. Western Union, which does a heck of a lot of business in my country, Coca-Cola, and you will find a computer shop, a computer place where you can have telephone by computer and you talk to your people. So everybody knows how to do this relatively well. Much more than you have here because everybody has a personal computer here. But this is a sequence which I was very much impressed. Internet is another basis for world communication. I find that a very interesting base. So this is service economy. As we go into the portable computers, we are going to go into manual capabilities of dealing with businesses and education and the rest on your hands. I think it's a fascinating era really for us. Yes, the lady, I can't see you.
Ana Mendes with the Port of New Orleans. What are you attributing your demand for more wheat and soya?
Ecuador does not have adequate land for wheat cultivation in the sense we normally did. And since I'm older, I can say that when I was young, I used to work in the farms growing wheat, and it was a non-profitable venture. First of all, it's a venture where we have a difference with the United States, which is heavily subsidized agriculture. If you keep up subsidizing your agriculture, and the Europeans and Japanese do, at a tune of $1.2 billion a day, we are non-competitive. And therefore, it stands to reason that we could buy it at a cheaper rate than we could produce it. But this is food security, so everybody's looking into this in the rest of the world. Countries are buying plots of land in other countries to grow food for them. So I find that that's a very interesting challenge in the near future. This is why we buy wheat, but undoubtedly our wheat is not only bread for us, it's soups and everything else. So we can say very simplistically that we will require wheat for a long term. Soy, because we do not produce enough soy, although we have the capabilities of doing it, and we're going into that. On the corn issue, you know very well that we have problems of pricing because you're selling corn to ethanol, because you're subsidizing ethanol. So your wheat fields are going into corn, and corn is going into ethanol, and therefore you're having a different perception of the market, a different inclination of the market because of the subsidies. That would be my answer to it. We would like to see food pricing go down. We don't see that happening in the near future. We think it's a spiral around 1 to 2 years at least. And that will create a very complex situation because as you go to countries which have a lower poverty line, people have 50% of their income dedicated to food. If the prices go up, it's more. And if you don't have that possibility, you're going to have riots. I hope I answered your question. There was another person here. Yes?
Taking a slightly different bent, I just wanted to say, as I introduced myself to you earlier, I am the Executive Director of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana. And we just want you to know that the city and the state are very happy to have the Consulate of Ecuador return to New Orleans. We understand when you left after Katrina, the city changed a lot then, we went through difficult times. But it is most important that we have this consulate back in New Orleans, even though the Ecuadorian community here is not the largest of the Latino communities. But it's important that you be here, and we wish the consulate all the best success, and we are here to help Luis in all his endeavors. And we hope that as you are interested in bringing trade delegations in both directions, that before that happens, you know, since Katrina, we've had a lot of change in the city. There are a lot of people who have retired since that point that are no longer involved in this area. There are a lot of new people and new businesses that have come here. And there are a lot of just New Orleanians that they really don't know anything about Ecuador, not necessarily the schools and not at the business and not at the political level. So I think that it will be very important for Luis to spend a lot of time in his first year here going out to the community, going to visit the ports, but also visiting those companies that I'm sure your country has a list of who does the most exports, getting to create those relationships and getting involved in everything he can here in New Orleans. We only have 4 or 5 actual consulates here. The rest are honorary consuls. And one of the actual consuls here is the Consulate of Mexico, and Mr. Hugo Garza from the consulate is here. And they have been tremendously successful because every place that I go, I see Hugo there. The Mexican consulate goes to every event in New Orleans. They go to city council meetings, they go to the World Trade Club, they come to the foreign affairs, they're at the universities. Everybody knows the Mexican consulate, everybody knows La Señora Consul, and they know Hugo. And I think that that has been a very smart business model, and we welcome Luis into that chain of chaos with all of us here, and wish him the very best. And if there's anything that we can do, we're here and stand ready to assist.
Thank you. You already given him an agenda. No, I think you're absolutely right. We're here to do that, and we hope to do it very competitively. I think we have a very important relationship to grow on, and that is fundamental in this. Getting to know Ecuador is a task for us, because a small country has to do. It's really a challenge. I'll give you numbers on that, because I have an embassy in the United States Embassy in Quito is 192 foreign service officers plus local staff, which is 500. Sylvia and I are a 6-man embassy with an ambassador. So we do our best. We do our best, and I know Luis will do his best in this challenge. So we're here to do the bidding, and we're because of the electronics an email away or a call away. So Luis will be coordinated with all of us, but in any way, the embassy is always there to serve us. And I'm very happy that we can work with the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I think it has a fantastic role. We are visiting, Jonathan this afternoon is tasked to go into the specific delicatessen market for products that Ecuador sells in those high-ranking types of food issues. Specified types of chocolate, coffee, or this type of thing, which cater to very high level demand in the United States. So we also have that part of the niche market. If you want good chocolate, buy it from Ecuador. The Swiss do, and they sell you the chocolate. Yes, another question, please. Yes.
I have a question, sir. First of all, thank you for being here. Well, my question is related to the world commercial trade. Colombia and Panama, they are negotiating a free trade agreement with the United States. The last president of Colombia, Mr. Uribe, he worked so hard trying to close the deal, but unfortunately, the U.S. haven't made a decision yet. President Santos is also doing a lot of effort on closing the deal. However, there are some parties, some conservative parties, who actually think that the local industry is not prepared for that agreement with the United States. What are your thoughts about the topic, and would you think that that free agreement is going to be a win-win relationship for both countries?
Well, it's very difficult for me to talk about what Colombia and Panama want, but of course, we recognize that Colombia has had a very important effort since 2005. We have seen that they have continually their effort to get this issue of the free trade agreement in Congress. we know where they're at. We follow this on a very detailed way because I go to Congress every 3 times a week. Let me explain that, because if I were an ambassador to anywhere in the world, Brazil or France or whatever, and I had a preference system that was going to lapse, I would probably go into their foreign office and say, gentlemen, the preference system is going to lapse on the 31st of December, and they would say, don't worry, Ambassador, come back in 3 weeks, or we'll call you in 3 weeks, we'll arrange it with Congress, don't. Because according to the legislation of those countries, for a foreign agent to go in and lobby is prohibited. You know, you can get shot in some parts of the world for this. But in the United States, the dynamics of the politics is different. You have people who you talk to about these things, and you say, have you gone up to Congress? Have you lobbied Congress? Do you have a lobby firm? I have a lobby firm. It's Patton Boggs, and Boggs is Louisiana. Yeah. And do you have PR firms? Yes, we do have PR firms. What is your target? 435 members of the House of Representatives who are in an ever-increasing campaign of getting reelected, and therefore you have a problem of challenging, because many of them have never gone out of the United States. Some say 60% don't have passports. Some say 20% do have passports. So a problem for a smaller country is really a task to get into the vision of local politics in the United States, with the exception of saying, you produce cotton, I buy cotton from you in your district. Now, you have 100 senators, which each one of these people has 10 to 15 staff. So you're talking about a universe around 6,000 people. Besides, I know this because I go into these details. Nobody really. 29,000 people work in the United States Congress in Washington. I know these things. For a smaller country, it's a very difficult task to do. Now, if I were to analyze what the situation in the politics of the United States are at the present moment, I would say that the rivalry between the Republicans and Democrats is such that I do not think many things are moving except for the budget issue. The rest are being kept on hold, or they're calling for all types of meetings on these things. I would hope that that Congress go into these things that brother countries like Colombia and Peru want, and Panama want. But I don't know if this is going to happen in Congress in the next few months. Maybe there will be a deal on this thing. Now, that being said, I also think that the world is changing in the way you view these accesses to market and free trade agreements. Colombia and Peru just signed the access treaty to Europe. So while this is happening in the United States, the Europeans have already signed it, so the trade will symmetrically go to that part also. It's a matter of competitiveness. Where you can sell at a lower price, how you can compete with better conditions is the name of the game. If you're late, you lose. Who loses? Your companies. Who loses? Employment. Because in the long run, you're doing that. For us, it's a very unique deal. We have 95% of American products enter Ecuador without any tariff. So we already have what you would call an access market to the Americans, because it's to our convenience. What do we buy basically from the United States? Machinery, spare parts, productive elements for our industries. So, we have no major problem with that. No more questions? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Gallegos. I think we really have a much better understanding. You've given us an excellent insight into the things that are important to you in Ecuador, and the trade in Ecuador, and how we can be of mutual benefit to each other. And I, for one, took a lot of notes and look forward to working very closely with you here in the future. And we're so glad that you're back in New Orleans. And you're going to find that our arms are open wide and all over the city for your presence with us. Now, I would like for you to come up, and we want to honor you this morning in a very special way. And actually, it is our highest honor that we can bestow here at the World Trade Center, New Orleans. The World Trade Center of New Orleans was the first of more than 300 centers worldwide today, and is dedicated to world peace, trade, and understanding. The Order of the Plimsoll Mark, the World Trade Center's highest honor, is reserved for heads of state, cabinet ministers, ambassadors, and other visiting dignitaries for their contributions to world peace, trade, and understanding. Recipients of the award include Presidents Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Mikhail Gorbachev, Secretary of State Henry Kissinger, and numerous ambassadors from other nations during their visits to the World Trade Center. And so this morning, we have for you a very special certificate signifying the Plimsoll Order of the Plimsoll Mark, and also a medallion that, if I can get it out of this beautiful case. And I would like to bestow this on behalf of the World Trade Center of New Orleans for you.
Thank you very much, man.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Well, thank you very much, Bob. This is a very big honor, which I receive in the name of the Ecuador, and of course, we feel very honored to be here back in New Orleans. I think Luis has an enormous task in front of him, and we have all decided to not only say we're back, but we're back for business and open for new opportunities. Thank you very much. I will have this in a very special place. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank each of you for being here this morning. This has been a great occasion, and certainly full of just interesting information, and information that we can use to help one another in the future, and we plan to do that.